This is a fictional story inspired by real life. The cool evening breeze off the Atlantic did little to ease the tension building inside the grand coastal estate. Situated in the affluent neighborhood of Ocean Ridge, just outside the bustling city of Boston, Massachusetts, the mansion was a spectacle of modern architectural mastery. Massive floor-to-ceiling glass walls faced the ocean, allowing the rhythmic sound of crashing waves to blend seamlessly with the upbeat music playing within. Hundreds of students from the prestigious Oakwood Academy, an elite private high school known for harboring the children of the East Coast's most influential families, had gathered to celebrate the 17th birthday of a young man named Julian Vance. It was the kind of gathering where wealth wasn't just possessed, it was performed. Diamond bracelets caught the light, designer dresses swept across the polished marble floors, and exclusive watches were casually displayed. Yet, amidst all the glittering extravagance, a young woman moved through the crowd like a quiet, unnoticed shadow, completely detached from the celebration around her. Her name was Maya Vance, though she shared absolutely no relation to the wealthy family hosting the event. At 17 years old, Maya possessed a calm, observant nature, with light brown hair tied neatly back and dark, thoughtful eyes that seemed to record everything without uttering a word. While her classmates wore tailored suits and expensive gowns, Maya wore a simple, unadorned black and white catering uniform. She was holding a heavy silver platter laden with crystal glasses of sparkling cider, her arms aching from the sheer weight of the tray and the emotional burden of the environment. Maya wasn't a guest, she was there to work. Her mother, Elena Marino, had spent nearly a decade working as a domestic helper and caterer for several prominent families in the Boston area. Elena was a woman of immense resilience, possessing a quiet fortitude shaped by years of hard labor and a deep, unshakable devotion to her daughter. When Julian's mother had suggested that Maya assist with the catering for the party, framing it as a wonderful learning experience, Elena had seen right through the polite gesture. She knew it simply meant additional cheap labor for an exceptionally large and demanding gathering. Yet, they needed the income, and Maya had insisted on helping. As Elena walked past her daughter to collect a few empty glasses, she leaned in closer, her voice a soothing murmur. "Keep your chin up, sweetheart," Elena whispered, her eyes full of maternal warmth. "Just remember, this isn't our world. We are only passing through." Maya offered a faint, reassuring smile. "I know, Mom," she replied softly, but inside, the reality of her situation stung. Every single day, Maya attended Oakwood Academy on a highly competitive academic scholarship. She sat in the very same classrooms as these wealthy teenagers, consistently achieving the highest marks in her grade. Yet, the moment school hours ended, the invisible barrier dividing their worlds became impossibly high. On the far side of the illuminated swimming pool, Julian Vance stood surrounded by his usual inner circle, laughing loudly. Julian was the epitome of inherited privilege, a young man who never had to strive for anything because his family's name cleared every obstacle before he even encountered it. Standing directly next to him was Victoria Sterling, a young woman whose elegant appearance masked a remarkably sharp and frosty demeanor. Victoria possessed a cruel talent for making others feel insignificant with a single, calculating glance. Suddenly, her sharp laughter cut through the ambient music. "Oh, Julian, look over there," Victoria remarked, gesturing subtly toward Maya with a slender finger. "It seems your mother even hired live entertainment for your birthday." A few teenagers in the group chuckled, looking over at Maya. Julian glanced toward her and offered a smirk that lacked any real warmth. "Let her be, Victoria," he murmured carelessly. "She's just doing her job." His tone wasn't defensive, it was entirely dismissive, treating Maya as though she were a mere piece of furniture, an inanimate part of the lavish decor. "I'm not being cruel," Victoria retorted, her lips curling into a wicked smile. "I'm just saying this party is starting to put me to sleep. We need some amusement." Hearing the distant laughter, Maya felt a sudden warmth rush to her cheeks, but she chose to say nothing. She never engaged. Turning slowly, she began walking back toward the quiet safety of the kitchen. As she moved away, her grandfather's timeless wisdom echoed in her mind. Her grandfather had been a proud, disciplined man who served in the military, a man who never possessed financial wealth but walked with a profound sense of honor. "Dignity, Maya, is the one thing no one can ever steal from you," he used to tell her. "You are the only one who can surrender it." Tightening her grip on the silver platter, Maya resolved that she would not surrender her dignity tonight. Meanwhile, Victoria watched Maya's retreating figure, a malicious idea taking root in her mind. She leaned closer to Julian, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "I think I've just discovered the perfect way to make this evening unforgettable," she whispered. Julian raised an eyebrow, mildly intrigued. "What are you planning, Victoria?" She smiled slyly. "Look at Maya." Julian sighed, looking bored. "The housekeeper's daughter? What about her?" Victoria then pointed discreetly toward a secluded, dimly lit corner of the expansive manicured garden, far away from the loud music and the bustling crowd. A tall young man stood entirely alone, dressed in a sharp, tie-less charcoal suit, gazing quietly up at the night sky. "And now, look at him," Victoria whispered. Julian followed her gaze, his eyes widening slightly in recognition. "Wait, is that Ethan Sterling?" "No, that's Ethan Harrison, isn't it?" Victoria nodded triumphantly. "Exactly, the son of Arthur Harrison." The Harrison name carried immense weight across the entire country. Their sprawling real estate empires, luxury hotels, and global investment firms were legendary. Everyone knew who Arthur Harrison was, but his son Ethan was a complete enigma. He rarely appeared at high society social gatherings, consciously avoiding the spotlight. Many of his peers labeled him as aloof or intensely reserved, while others whispered that he was simply too intelligent to waste his time on superficial conversations. "My father practically begged him to come," Victoria explained. "He's trying to secure a major business partnership with the Harrison Corporation." Julian looked genuinely puzzled. "All right, but what does a billionaire's son have to do with Maya?" Victoria's grin widened with malice. "We are going to introduce them. We'll tell Maya that Ethan noticed her from across the yard, that he was deeply captivated by her presence, and that he desperately wants to meet her." Julian began to laugh, finding the cruel deception incredibly amusing. "Oh, that is absolutely brutal." They had no understanding of the emotional damage they were about to cause. To them, it was a harmless game. To Maya, it would be a deep emotional wound. And for Ethan, it would be the exact moment he realized the true nature of the people around him. Maya was placing a stack of empty porcelain plates near the large glass doors when Victoria and Julian approached her. Victoria's expression was suddenly painted with an unnaturally sweet maternal kindness, while Julian lingered a step behind, attempting to look nonchalant despite the eager, childish gleam in his eyes. "Maya, right?" Victoria asked, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. Maya paused, her posture stiffening. Victoria Sterling had never once spoken her name in all the years they had attended the same school. "Yes," Maya replied cautiously, keeping her voice low. "Hi. Well, I'm Victoria, and this is Julian, of course." "I know," Maya murmured. "Happy birthday, Julian!" Julian simply nodded, looking away toward the pool. Victoria leaned in closer, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Listen, I know this might sound incredibly random, but there is someone very special at this party who is dying to meet you." Maya felt a sudden, heavy knot form in her stomach. "Meet me? Why?" "He's a very exclusive guest, but he's incredibly reserved." Victoria lied effortlessly. "He saw you working and remarked that you have an undeniable presence." Maya looked between Victoria and Julian, every instinct screaming that something was terribly wrong. "I really need to get back to work," Maya said, taking a deliberate step backward. "Oh, don't be like that," Victoria insisted, gently grabbing her arm. "Seriously, he just wants to talk to you for a brief moment. He's waiting right over there in the garden, underneath the large weeping willow tree." "If this is a joke, it isn't funny," Maya said, her voice trembling slightly. Victoria feigned deep offense, widening her eyes. "A joke? Maya, we are actually trying to do something nice for you." Julian grew impatient, checking his watch. "Just go. Ethan is waiting for you." Victoria shot him a quick, warning glare, annoyed that he had revealed the name so quickly, but the word was already out. "Ethan." Maya stood frozen. Ethan Harrison could not possibly want to meet her. It defied all logic. Yet, a small, fragile, and desperate part of her heart desperately wanted to believe it. What if, for once, someone saw past the uniform? What if someone in that elite world recognized her worth? She felt foolish for even entertaining the thought, but hope can be a dangerous thing. "He's right through those hedges," Victoria urged softly. "Don't keep him waiting." Maya glanced toward the busy kitchen. Her mother was entirely occupied. It would only take a single minute to check. With her heart hammering violently against her ribs, Maya began walking out into the dark garden. The moment she was out of earshot, Julian let out a low chuckle. This is going to be magnificent. He pulled his smartphone from his pocket, but Victoria quickly grabbed his wrist. Come on. If we hide behind the manicured boxwood hedges, we can record everything perfectly. They slipped away into the shadows. The muffled sound of the party music faded into the background as Maya walked deeper into the estate's coastal garden. The air was cool, carrying the crisp scent of the nearby ocean. Every step she took felt like a profound mistake. She wanted to turn around, to sprint back to the safety of the kitchen, to completely disappear from sight, but a stubborn need to know kept her moving forward. Finally, she reached the massive weeping willow tree. Standing beneath its cascading branches was a tall young man, his back turned to her. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit without a tie, staring silently at the moonlit ocean. Maya swallowed hard, clearing her throat. "Hello," she said softly. The young man turned around slowly, revealing the striking, composed features of Ethan Harrison. Maya recognized him immediately. His family's immense wealth and his own quiet reputation were frequent topics of hushed conversation at Oakwood Academy, even though he didn't attend the school. Ethan looked at her with polite curiosity, though his confusion was completely evident. "Hello?" he replied courteously. "I was just stepping out for some fresh air. Do you need something?" In that exact instant, the warmth entirely drained from Maya's face as the invisible trap snapped shut. From the darkness of the nearby hedges, a muffled, cruel laugh echoed through the quiet night. The absolute weight of the humiliation hit her like an icy wave. She had been utterly deceived. They had sent her out here specifically to be rejected, to be laughed at, to be recorded, and to be turned into a mocking story for their friends. "Oh," Maya whispered, her voice cracking. Her eyes welled with hot tears, but she fiercely refused to let them fall. Not in front of them. Not in front of him. "I understand now." Ethan knit his brows, his sharp ears catching the distant giggles from the bushes. "What do you understand?" Maya crossed her arms tightly over her chest, trying to stop her body from shaking. That this was all just a joke. "What joke?" Ethan asked, his voice growing serious. Maya shook her head, turning to leave. "It doesn't matter. I just need to go." "Wait," Ethan commanded gently, stepping forward. His voice possessed no mockery. It was completely grounded and firm. "Who exactly sent you out here?" Maya paused, tearing herself away from the darkness. Before she could answer, Victoria's voice sang out maliciously from the shadows. "Ethan! Your special date has finally arrived. We found her, just for you." Julian stepped out alongside her, holding his phone up, the camera lens catching the moonlight. "We told her you were completely mesmerized by her." Ethan looked at the teenagers emerging from the bushes, then turned his gaze back to Maya. In that quiet moment, he understood the entire situation. He saw the sheer cruelty, the profound lack of empathy, and the terrifying ease with which these privileged individuals could attempt to break another human being simply because they were bored. Maya stood entirely still, bracing herself for what she assumed would be the final crushing blow. She fully expected Ethan to join in on the laughter, to protect his social standing among his peers. But he didn't laugh. Instead, he observed her with a deep, respectful seriousness that completely disarmed her. He saw her simple uniform, her trembling hands, and the monumental effort she was making to keep herself from shattering. Maya took a deep, steadying breath, remembering her grandfather's words. "You choose how you stand." She lifted her chin, her voice quiet but remarkably steady. "I am deeply sorry for bothering you, Mr. Harrison. I was told you requested my presence. I see now that it was entirely untrue." She offered a polite, dignified nod. "Good night." She turned to walk away, but Ethan's voice cut through the air. "What is your name?" Maya stopped, but did not turn back around. "Maya. Maya," Ethan repeated, his tone soft yet firm. "Who exactly told you I was waiting for you?" She glanced back at him, a flicker of wounded pride in her eyes. "Why does it matter? So everyone can have a funnier version of the story tomorrow?" "My grandfather served in the military," she said, her voice rising slightly with a fierce, quiet energy. "He taught me that while we cannot always choose our battles, we can always choose how we stand. Right now, I am standing. If you'll excuse me, I have a job to finish." An uncomfortable, heavy silence fell over the garden. Victoria and Julian's smirks began to fade. The prank was completely veering off course. Maya wasn't weeping, she wasn't begging, and Ethan wasn't amused. In fact, he looked absolutely furious. "Wait," Ethan said once more, walking past Maya and stepping directly toward the hedges. "Step out here." Julian and Victoria shifted uncomfortably, Julian awkwardly lowering his phone. "Look, Ethan, man, it was just a joke," Julian muttered, unable to meet Ethan's intense stare. Ethan looked at him with an icy coldness that made Julian visibly flinch. "You used my name to humiliate someone who is working hard in your home. Do you honestly think that is elegant? Do you think that is funny?" Victoria opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Ethan turned back to Maya, who remained standing under the willow tree. The cruel game was over, but something far more impactful had just begun. Ethan Harrison, a young man who historically wanted nothing to do with high society drama, had just witnessed a profound, unbreakable dignity in a housekeeper's daughter, a dignity he had never once seen in any of his wealthy peers. "People show exactly who they are when they believe no one of importance is watching," Ethan said, looking directly at Julian and Victoria. "But I was watching." He turned his back on them completely, walking over to stand beside Maya. "I am truly sorry for their behavior." Maya swallowed the lump in her throat. "You don't have to apologize. You didn't do anything. I belong to their world," Ethan responded quietly, looking out at the ocean. "Or at least, it appears that way." He looked at her truly, his eyes resting on her composed face. "Your grandfather was in the military?" Maya nodded, surprised by the genuine question. "Yes. His name was Manuel Moreno. He received a commendation for his service, though he always maintained he was simply doing what was right." Ethan nodded slowly, a respectful smile touching his lips. "He raised you incredibly well." The silence that settled over the garden was thicker and far more agonizing than any shouting match could ever be. Maya could feel her pulse racing, her mind still trying to process the surreal reality of the situation. She was still standing on the multi-million-dollar property of the Vance family, surrounded by individuals who possessed an astronomical amount of material wealth, but for the first time all evening, she did not feel small. Victoria Sterling clenched her jaw so tightly her muscles strained. Her flawless plan had completely disintegrated. The girl who was supposed to run away crying was standing tall, and Ethan Harrison, the one person Victoria desperately wanted to impress, was looking at Maya with undeniable respect. "Ethan, you are completely overreacting," Victoria said, trying to inject a casual, airy tone back into her voice. "It was just a silly thing. We're just teenagers having some fun." Ethan turned his gaze slowly toward her, his expression utterly unreadable. "Fun?" His voice was dangerously quiet. He looked over at Julian. "Is that what you call using a young woman who is working to support her family as an object of ridicule in front of a crowd?" Julian lowered his gaze entirely, his face flushing a deep, embarrassed red. Suddenly, the joke felt incredibly dangerous. Having Ethan Harrison disappointed in him was a catastrophic consequence. Julian's parents had spent the last 6 months aggressively trying to schedule a business meeting with Arthur Harrison. A single negative impression from Ethan could completely destroy a multi-million-dollar corporate alliance. "We didn't mean any real harm, Ethan," Julian stammered, his confidence entirely gone. "We just thought it would be a quick laugh." "It wasn't." Ethan's 2 words dropped like lead weights, completely silencing the birthday boy. Maya watched the exchange, a complex wave of emotions washing over her. Part of her felt a profound sense of relief, but a larger part simply wanted to escape. Even though Ethan was defending her, she was still the absolute center of attention, a position she had spent her entire life trying to avoid. She didn't want to be a battleground for wealthy teenagers. She just wanted to finish her shift and go home with her mother. Taking a quiet step backward, she broke the suffocating tension. "I have to return to the kitchen." Ethan looked at her, the intense hardness in his eyes softening immediately. He understood completely. Defending her didn't mean forcing her to remain in an uncomfortable situation. "Yes," he said gently, stepping aside. "You should go." He was giving her a graceful exit. Without another word, Maya turned and walked back toward the mansion. She didn't run, though her legs desperately wanted to sprint. She didn't lower her head, though her instincts begged her to hide. Every single step she took across that lawn felt like a quiet, personal victory. The moment she disappeared through the side entrance of the house, Ethan's demeanor turned incredibly cold. He turned back to Julian, extending an open hand. "Give me the phone." Julian blinked, feigning ignorance. "What?" The phone you were just using to record her. Give it to me, Julian. Now. Ethan didn't raise his voice, but the absolute authority in his tone was terrifying. Julian hesitated, his hand hovering over his pocket. Come on, Ethan, I already deleted it. Ethan took a deliberate step closer, his eyes locking onto Julian's. Give me the phone right now, or I will walk inside, find your father, call my father, and explain to both of them exactly how you and Victoria treat the people who work in this house. Julian froze. That was a language he understood perfectly. Consequences, family reputations, and business downfalls. With a trembling hand, he unlocked his phone and handed it over. Ethan opened the video gallery. There was the recording. Maya walking alone toward the willow tree. He pressed play, and Victoria's muffled voice emerged from the speaker. This is perfect. Did she honestly believe someone like Ethan would ever want to look at her? Ethan's jaw clenched so hard a muscle ticked. He turned the screen around, forcing both of them to look at their own reflections. This is exactly who you are when you think no one important is watching, Ethan said. He then permanently deleted the video, went into the phone's trash folder, and erased it completely. He tossed the phone back at Julian's chest. We are entirely done here. Ethan, wait! Victoria called out desperately, her voice dropping its haughty edge. She was completely unaccustomed to losing control of a situation. Don't be like this. We only did it because we thought you were having a miserable time. Ethan paused, looking back at her one final time. The only thing that makes me miserable, he said coldly, is this environment, and people like you. He turned and walked away, bypassing the main party entirely, as he headed straight for the front gates to call his driver. He was leaving. Julian and Victoria were left standing entirely alone in the dark garden, the distant party music sounding incredibly hollow. He absolutely despises us, Julian whispered, terrified. Don't be so dramatic, Victoria snapped, though her own hands were shaking. My father is going to ruin me if he finds out about this, Julian muttered, staring at the ground. Victoria glared at him. It's not our fault. She's the one who made us look ridiculous in front of Ethan. Her eyes narrowed with a fresh, bitter resentment. This isn't over. She thinks she's special now. We'll see how long that lasts. Maya did not return straight to the bustling main kitchen. Instead, she slipped into a quiet, narrow service hallway reserved exclusively for the staff. The vibrant sounds of the birthday celebration vanished completely behind the heavy wooden door, replaced by the mundane scents of polished wood and cleaning supplies. The stark reality of what had just happened settled over her. She carefully placed the silver platter on a small folding table, pressed her back against the cool wall, and slowly slid down until she was sitting on the floor. Her entire body began to tremble. Every ounce of emotion she had tightly contained in the garden came rushing out. The overwhelming shame, the sharp sting of anger, and the deep emotional wound of the deception tore through her. They had recorded her. They had laughed at her. And the absolute worst part was that for a fleeting, foolish second, she had allowed herself to believe it. She had allowed herself to think that someone like Ethan Harrison could genuinely see her as an equal. How could I be so incredibly foolish? She whispered into the empty hallway. But then, she forced herself to remember the rest of it. Ethan hadn't laughed. He had stood by her side. He had defended her with an intensity that shocked everyone. He had treated her like a human being, completely ignoring the uniform she wore. A single tear escaped her eye, and she wiped it away fiercely. She refused to be defeated. Her grandfather would have expected her to stand tall. Hearing approaching footsteps, Maya pushed herself off the floor, smoothing her uniform, and picking up her tray just as the kitchen door swung open. It was her mother, Elena. Maya, there you are. I've been looking for you, Elena said, but she stopped dead in her tracks the moment she saw her daughter's face. A mother always knows. She saw the slightly reddened eyes, the rigid posture, and the broken expression. What happened, sweetheart? Elena asked, her voice dropping all professional pretense. Maya tried to offer a casual wave. Nothing, Mom. Just tired. Do not lie to me, Maya, Elena said, stepping closer, her voice laced with a protective edge. Who did this to you? Maya bit her lip, knowing she couldn't keep it from her. Just some students from school. Julian and Victoria. Elena closed her eyes for a brief second, taking a long, deep breath. She already knew the types. What did they do? They just They played a cruel trick on me because I was working the shift, Maya said, trying to minimize the event to protect her mother's feelings. It's fine, really, but Elena knew her daughter intimately. It is absolutely not fine if it brought you to tears, Maya. Maya lowered her gaze. Elena gently placed her hands on either side of her daughter's face, forcing Maya to look into her eyes. Listen to me very carefully. You are worth infinitely more than all of their family names, their expensive sports cars, or their coastal mansions combined. Do you hear me? I know. Mom, Maya whispered. No, I need you to truly believe it, Elena said, pulling her into a fierce, protective embrace. Your grandfather always used to say that the world is divided into two kinds of people, those who build others up and those who try to destroy them. They tried to destroy you tonight. She pulled back slightly, looking directly into Maya's eyes. Do not ever let them succeed. Maya hugged her mother tightly, finally feeling a sense of absolute safety return to her heart. But neither of them had any idea that the cruel game was far from over. Victoria Sterling had no intention of accepting a public defeat, and when Monday morning arrived at Oakwood Academy, the situation was about to become infinitely worse. Maya walked into the small staff restroom, turned on the brass faucet, and splashed cold water onto her face. When she lifted her head and looked into the mirror, she saw a subtle change in the girl staring back at her. The uniform was identical, the setting was the same, but something deep within her spirit had shifted. The girl in the reflection was no longer a helpless victim. She was the granddaughter of Manuel Moreno, the daughter of Elena, and she refused to let a single night of cruelty define her existence. She adjusted her hair, smoothed the wrinkles from her apron, and walked back out into the main kitchen. The head of catering looked up from his clipboard the moment she entered. Maya, perfect timing. Can you run this outside quickly? He asked, pointing toward a small, elegant tray with a single glass of water and 2 small lemon shortbread cookies. It's for an exclusive guest who is currently waiting for his car. Maya picked up the tray without thinking. Sure. Who is it for? The manager glanced down at his notes. Ethan Harrison. He requested a bottle of water before his driver leaves. He's parked right by the main iron gates. Maya felt her heart skip a beat. Ethan. He's still here? Yes, just deliver it to the black sedan at the front entrance. You can head out through the side courtyard. Maya stared at the simple tray. A bottle of water and 2 cookies. Something completely ordinary. Yet, her hands began to tremble with anxiety. Why was he still waiting? She briefly considered asking another staff member to take it, but she immediately rejected the thought. She didn't hide from her responsibilities. All right, she said firmly. Stepping out into the cool night air, the loud music finally faded completely into the background. The massive stone driveway was lined with dozens of luxury vehicles, but at the very end, near the wrought iron gates, a sleek black sedan sat idling quietly. Maya walked down the driveway, her footsteps sounding incredibly loud to her own ears. When she reached the passenger side of the vehicle, she tapped lightly on the tinted glass. The window rolled down in absolute silence, revealing Ethan sitting in the back seat. The soft interior light illuminated his sharp features, making him look remarkably mature and composed. I thought you had already left, Maya said softly, holding the tray. I was waiting, Ethan replied simply. Maya looked down at the tray. For the cookies? Ethan shook his head slightly, his gaze steady. For you. Maya stood completely speechless, the breath catching in her throat. Why? I wanted to ensure you were truly all right, Ethan said, his voice entirely devoid of hidden agendas or superficial politeness. It confused her. I'm perfectly fine, Maya lied, the words sounding just as hollow as they had when she spoke to her mother. Ethan looked down at the small porcelain plate. Are those the lemon shortbreads? Yes. Water and lemon cookies. Ethan let out a soft sigh. In truth, I absolutely detest lemon cookies. Maya wrinkled her nose in confusion. Then, why did you request them? Ethan paused, a faint smile appearing on his face. Because I needed a legitimate reason to speak with you completely away from them, and away from your mother. Maya looked at him with genuine surprise. My mother? I saw you with her in the service hallway when I was heading out, Ethan explained quietly. Maya felt a familiar warmth of embarrassment creep into her neck. He had seen her sitting on the floor. He had seen her break down. Don't do that, Ethan said firmly. Maya looked up. Do what? Feel ashamed for an act of cruelty you had absolutely no part in creating. Maya remained silent, completely unaccustomed to anyone from this social circle speaking to her with such raw, unvarnished honesty. "I really have to return this tray," she whispered, offering the cookies. "Take them. I need to bring the plate back inside." Ethan took the small plate, setting it on the leather seat beside him. "Your grandfather," he began, looking back up at her. "The military veteran. What was his full name?" The question caught her completely off guard. "Manuel Moreno." Ethan repeated the name quietly, as if committing it to memory. Manuel Moreno. He raised a remarkable granddaughter. Maya observed the young man sitting in front of her, the heir to one of the most powerful financial empires in the country, a person who could easily have anything he desired. Yet, he was the only person at that entire celebration, besides her mother, who had treated her with absolute human decency. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked bluntly. Ethan looked at her, his eyes serious. "Why are they so incredibly cruel to you?" The question left her silent. Ethan continued. "The vast majority of the people inside that mansion live entirely on a diet of appearances. They discuss investments, luxury vehicles, and social status. But the moment you strip those material things away," he glanced back at the glowing house, "many of them possess absolutely nothing of substance inside. You are not weak, Maya." Maya looked down at her shoes. "You don't know anything about me." "I saw more than enough tonight," Ethan said softly. "You stood there with an entire crowd laughing at your expense, and you completely refused to let them break your dignity. That requires a level of internal strength they will never understand." Maya didn't know how to respond. For the very first time in her life, someone from this world had recognized the exact thing she fought so hard to protect. The driver discreetly glanced at his watch in the rearview mirror. Ethan noticed the movement. "I have to leave," Maya nodded. "Thank you for everything you did back there." As she turned to walk away, Ethan reached into his pocket. "Maya, wait." She immediately took a cautious step back, her instincts on high alert. Ethan noticed and quickly held up a small, elegant white card. "It isn't money. It's just my personal number." Maya stared at the card. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because Victoria and Julian are not going to simply forget what occurred tonight," Ethan explained, his voice calm but heavy with certainty. "When Monday morning arrives at school, they are going to attempt to rewrite the narrative to protect themselves." Maya knew he was entirely correct. "I can handle school on my own." "I am fully aware of that," Ethan said, extending the card further. "This isn't an offer of protection, Maya. It's an offer of support. There is a profound difference between the two." Maya hesitated, feeling as though accepting the card meant crossing an invisible social boundary she had spent years maintaining. But ultimately, she reached out and took it. Their fingers brushed for a fraction of a second. "Thank you," she whispered. "Good night, Maya." "Good night, Ethan." The window rolled up smoothly, and the black sedan quietly melted into the dark coastal roads. Maya stood alone under the street lamp, holding the small white card. She had no idea that those 10 digits were about to alter the entire trajectory of her life. The school bus ride home that evening was completely enveloped in silence. The city of Boston was still very much awake outside the windows, its towering skyscrapers casting long reflections across the dark harbor water. Elena didn't press her daughter for details. She understood Maya's silences, knowing how to differentiate between the quiet of simple physical exhaustion and the heavy silence of an emotional wound that was still actively bleeding. She simply reached across the seat and took Maya's hand. Elena's fingers were rough, calloused from years of relentless physical labor, but to Maya, they represented the absolute safest place in the entire world. Sunday passed in a tortuous blur of anxiety. Maya tried desperately to focus on her advanced calculus homework, tried to lose herself in a novel, and tried to convince her racing thoughts that the weekend's events were safely behind her. But her mind kept violently pulling her back to that manicured lawn. She could still hear Victoria's sharp laughter, see Julian's glowing phone screen, and remember the suffocating feeling of being trapped. And then, she would remember Ethan, the way he stood between her and the crowd, the respect in his voice, the way he looked at her as though she truly mattered. She pulled the small white card out of her desk drawer multiple times throughout the day, staring at the clean, elegant font. Was it a promise of a true ally, or was it the catalyst for even greater complications? She genuinely couldn't decide. Monday morning arrived with an icy, unforgiving speed. Oakwood Academy had always felt incredibly intimidating to Maya. Its historic brick buildings, towering ivy-covered arches, and grand hallways lined with oil portraits of distinguished alumni all served as a constant reminder that this institution was built exclusively for the elite. Maya had spent her entire academic career operating under a single golden rule: remain completely invisible. But the exact moment she stepped through the heavy oak front doors that morning, she realized that invisibility was no longer an option. The whispering began almost immediately. At first, it was just hushed murmurs at the lockers, but as she walked down the main corridor, the voices became bolder, sharper. People who had walked past her for 3 solid years without ever acknowledging her existence were now actively turning their heads, staring openly, and snickering. It was a deeply jarring sensation. Before, it had hurt that no one saw her. Now, it hurt infinitely more that everyone was watching. When she finally reached her locker, she found Victoria Sterling waiting for her, leaning elegantly against the metal frame. Julian stood right beside her, looking slightly uncomfortable but refusing to back down. Victoria, on the other hand, looked entirely radiant, as though she owned the building. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," Victoria announced loudly, intentionally drawing the attention of nearby students. Maya opened her locker, completely ignoring the comment. Then, Victoria uttered a word that made Maya freeze. "The stalker." Maya's hand stayed tightly gripped on the metal locker door. Slowly, she turned her head. "What did you just say?" Victoria smiled, an evil, satisfied expression crossing her features. "You heard me, Maya. Honestly, it was incredibly pathetic." Creeping out into the private gardens at Julian's house, desperately trying to corner Ethan Harrison to get his attention, Maya felt a profound chill run through her body. The lie was so massive, so incredibly brazen, that her brain struggled to process the sheer audacity of it. Victoria immediately seized upon her stunned silence, raising her voice for the benefit of the gathering crowd. Poor Ethan was so completely uncomfortable that he literally had to order his driver to take him away from the party early. Several students gasped and began whispering furiously. Maya looked directly at Julian, hoping against hope that he would possess a single shred of human decency. But Julian simply crossed his arms and looked away. "We all saw it, Maya," Julian lied, his voice forced. "We were just trying to help you avoid making a total fool of yourself." Maya was completely stunned. They had entirely inverted the truth. They were framing themselves as the concerned, benevolent bystanders, while she was being cast as the desperate, delusional scholarship student who had harassed a billionaire's son. The crowd of onlookers was growing by the second, everyone eager to witness the social execution. "That is absolutely not what happened," Maya said, her voice remarkably steady despite the chaos in her chest. "Oh, really?" Victoria challenged, taking a step closer, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper. "Tell me something, Maya. Who do you honestly think they are going to believe?" She gestured broadly to the wealthy students surrounding them. "Us? Or the housekeeper's daughter?" The sentence hung in the air like a physical blow. That was the core reality of Oakwood Academy. The truth didn't matter. Social leverage and family bank accounts did. Maya felt Ethan's card resting securely in her pocket. She could easily pull it out, call him right there, and expose the entire deception. But her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind once more. "You choose how you stand." Maya calmly reached into her locker, pulled out her history textbook, and shut the metal door with a sharp click that resonated through the quiet hallway. She looked Victoria dead in the eye. "You are completely pathetic." Victoria's triumphant smile vanished instantly. She had expected tears, begging, or a defensive outburst not absolute, unbothered calm. "What did you just say to me?" "You know exactly what happened," Maya said clearly. She looked over at Julian. "He knows what happened." She took a deep breath. "And Ethan knows exactly what happened. That is more than enough for me. Now move." For some inexplicable reason, Victoria actually stepped back, utterly stunned by Maya's lack of fear. Maya walked directly through the crowd of students, her posture perfectly straight. It was one of the most agonizing walks of her life, but she refused to run. The moment she entered the privacy of a bathroom stall, her hands began to shake violently. The lie was engineered perfectly. If she tried to publicly defend herself, she would look defensive and guilty. If she reached out to Ethan, it would look like she was confirming their story. She pulled out her phone and looked at the white card. "If you have problems, write to me." Her thumb hovered over the screen, but she forced herself to lock the phone. No, she would not drag him into this. This was her battle to fight. The rest of the school day was an absolute test of human endurance. In every class, she could hear hushed mockery. In every hallway, she felt the burning weight of judging eyes. At lunch, she sat entirely alone in the corner of the cafeteria, just as she always had, but the nature of her solitude had completely shifted. Before, her isolation was a byproduct of being invisible. Now, it was a deliberate, cruel isolation enforced by the student body. A group of popular girls at a nearby table spoke loudly enough for her to hear every syllable. Can you imagine actually thinking someone from the Harrison family would ever look twice at a charity case? Maya kept her eyes firmly fixed on her textbook, refusing to afford them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. She just needed to survive until the final bell, but her hopes were completely shattered when, during the final period, the school's headmistress, Dr. Catherine Vance, who happened to be Julian's aunt, appeared at the classroom door. Maya Moreno, please gather your things and come to my office immediately. In that terrifying moment, Maya realized that Victoria and Julian were playing a much larger game than she ever anticipated. Maya followed Dr. Catherine Vance through the long wood-paneled corridors of the administration wing. The historic portraits of the school's founders seemed to glare down at her, their expressions cold and unyielding. When they reached the heavy mahogany doors of the headmistress's office, Dr. Vance stepped inside, gesturing for Maya to follow. Sit down, Maya, she said, her voice dripping with a clinical, detached politeness. Maya sat in the leather chair, keeping her hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide the tremors. Dr. Vance took her seat behind a massive oak desk, shuffling through a thin folder before looking up. This morning, I received an incredibly disturbing report from the Vance and Sterling families regarding your conduct over the weekend. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Dr. Vance, whatever they told you is completely false. They engineered the entire thing. Julian and Victoria lied to me, telling me that Ethan Harrison wanted to meet me in the garden. Dr. Vance raised a manicured hand, silencing her instantly. Maya, please. I am fully aware that every conflict possesses multiple perspectives, she said coldly. However, my primary responsibility is to safeguard the absolute reputation and integrity of Oakwood Academy. Maya felt a sickening sensation in her stomach. The reputation of the school, not the pursuit of truth. The Harrison family is of monumental importance to this institution, Dr. Vance continued smoothly. We are currently in the final stages of securing a multi-million-dollar philanthropic endowment from Arthur Harrison for our new science and technology wing. Now, the pieces fit together perfectly. It was never about a high school misunderstanding. It was entirely about money. We simply cannot tolerate any inappropriate or uncomfortable situations involving that family, the headmistress said, particularly concerning young Ethan. Maya tightened her grip on her skirt. But I didn't do anything wrong. I was just working the party. Doctor, Vance let out a weary sigh, as if Maya were being intentionally difficult. Maya, you are an exceptionally talented student. No one is disputing your academic capabilities, but you must understand your position here. That phrase felt like an emotional blade. Your position. Maya knew precisely what it meant. You are a charity case. You are here on a scholarship. Families like the Sterlings and the Vances have financially anchored this academy for generations, Dr. Vance said, her eyes narrowing. So, what are you telling me to do? Maya asked, her voice dangerously close to breaking. You are to stay completely away from Julian Vance, Victoria Sterling, and under no circumstances are you to ever attempt to contact or approach Ethan Harrison again. Maya looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. But Ethan didn't do anything wrong. He actually… That is entirely enough, Maya, Dr. Vance interrupted, her tone hardening into steel. I do not want another single rumor circulating in these halls. I do not want any complications. Your academic scholarship at Oakwood depends not only on your grades, but on your flawless behavioral conduct. The explicit threat hung in the air. One more word, one more conflict, and her entire future, her dream of attending an elite university, her mother's years of sacrifice would be instantly erased. Do you understand me, Maya? The response felt like dry ash in her throat. Yes, Dr. Vance. Excellent. You are dismissed. Maya walked out of the office, the heavy door clicking shut behind her. The absolute injustice of it all crushed her spirit. Victoria had won completely. She hadn't just damaged Maya's social life, she had actively placed a target on her future. That afternoon, Maya didn't take the school bus. She walked the 3 miles back to their small apartment, needing the cold city air to clear her head. When she finally walked through the front door, the sun was dipping below the horizon. Elena was in the kitchen, carefully chopping vegetables for dinner. "Maya, you're late, sweetheart," she said, turning around with a warm smile that instantly vanished the moment she processed her daughter's shattered expression. "What happened?" Maya tried to speak, but the emotional dam broke entirely. She collapsed onto a kitchen chair and wept, pouring out the entire nightmare. She told her mother about the garden trick, Ethan's defense, the white business card, Victoria's horrific lies at school, the confrontation in the hallway, and finally, Dr. Vance's devastating threat regarding her scholarship. Elena listened in absolute silence, her face growing incredibly pale. But as the story progressed, the sadness in her eyes was replaced by a quiet, terrifying anger. When Maya finished, the small kitchen was completely still, save for the ticking of the wall clock. Elena slowly placed her kitchen knife down on the cutting board. "She threatened your scholarship?" Elena asked, her voice incredibly calm. "Yes," Maya sobbed. "She told me I had to stay quiet and stay away from everyone." Elena slowly untied her apron, folding it with meticulous precision before placing it on the table. "Put your coat back on." Maya blinked away her tears. "What? Why?" "We are going back to the school," Elena said firmly. "Mom, no, please," Maya begged, panicking. "It will only make things worse." "The headmistress said, 'I do not care what that woman said,'" Elena interrupted, her voice possessing a fierce authority Maya had never heard before. "For 10 long years, Maya, I have cleaned the homes of people like them. I have endured their dismissive glances, swallowed my pride, and smiled when I wanted to scream." Her eyes burned with an intense, maternal fire. "There is a massive difference between swallowing your pride to survive and allowing corrupt people to destroy your daughter's future." Maya stared at her mother, her heart pounding. "But they won't believe us, Mom. We have no power." Elena looked at her deeply. "Then we will force them to listen." "How?" Elena grabbed her car keys from the counter. "Your grandfather taught you how to stand tall, Maya. But he taught me something else." "What?" "That the truth is entirely useless, unless there are brave people willing to fight for it." The night air in Boston was bitterly cold as Maya and Elena pulled up to the grand gates of Oakwood Academy. The historic campus, which looked so full of promise during the day, now appeared dark, looming, and intensely hostile. Maya froze before opening the car door. "Mom, I am so terrified." It was the first time she had admitted it out loud. She wasn't afraid of Victoria's insults. She was terrified of losing the one ticket she had to a better life. Elena reached over, gently squeezing her hand. "Being brave does not mean you don't feel fear, Maya. It means you keep walking even when you are terrified." They stepped out of the car. The main administrative doors were unlocked for the night cleaning staff, and Elena marched through the grand lobby with a purposeful, unyielding stride. Maya had seen her mother walk through massive estates hundreds of times, always moving quietly, always trying to minimize her physical footprint. But tonight, Elena didn't walk like an employee. She walked like a mother defending her child's life. At the end of the long hallway, a warm light streamed from the headmistress's office. Elena didn't hesitate. She knocked firmly on the glass. "Doctor?" Catherine Vance looked up from her desk, her expression tightening into immediate annoyance when she recognized Maya. She opened the door, her voice frosty. "Miss Moreno, I believe I gave you explicit instructions this afternoon." Elena stepped directly into the room, placing herself between the headmistress and Maya. "Yes, you spoke to my daughter, but you haven't spoken to me. My name is Elena Moreno, and I am Maya's mother." "Doctor." Vance evaluated Elena's simple winter coat, her worn purse, and her calloused hands, making the exact same fatal mistake the students had made, assuming that financial humility equated to a lack of strength. "Mrs. Moreno, I understand you are upset, but this administrative matter has already been settled." Elena took a slow, deliberate step forward. "No, it has not. You threatened my daughter's academic future based entirely on the fabrications of wealthy teenagers because it was the most convenient option for your school's bank account." Dr. Vance's eyes flared with anger. "Watch your tone. You are speaking to the headmistress of this academy." "And you are speaking to a mother," Elena retorted, her voice completely steady. I know exactly how your world operates. I have cleaned up after families like yours for a decade, but I am not standing here tonight as a maid. I am standing here as a witness to my daughter's flawless character. Doctor. Vance leaned against her desk, adopting a superior sneer. Maya's scholarship requires an exemplary behavioral record. This entire situation proves otherwise. Elena looked her dead in the eye. What situation? The situation where your nephew and his friend committed an act of psychological cruelty against a working student? Or the situation where you decided to protect a corporate donation instead of an innocent child? The headmistress went completely pale. The Harrison family's relationship with this school is paramount. Then you have completely forgotten what an educational institution is supposed to represent, Elena said fiercely. My father was a military man, Dr. Vance. He always taught us that institutions are not made great by their expensive buildings or their wealthy donors. They are made great by their moral integrity. And tonight, you have shown absolutely none. Doctor, Vance pointed a trembling finger toward the door. I want you to leave this office immediately. And let me remind you, Maya's status at this school remains under review. Elena didn't flinch. She took Maya's hand. Come, Maya. We are leaving. They walked down to a small 24-hour diner a few blocks away, sitting in a vinyl booth under the flickering neon lights. Maya was shaking, tears streaming down her face. Mom, she's going to expel me. It's over. No, it isn't, Elena said, her eyes flashing with a sharp intelligence. She is terrified, Maya. People who possess true authority don't need to use threats to silence 17-year-old girls. Maya looked down at the table, but she has all the leverage. Elena shook her head. She has a title, Maya. That isn't the same thing as power. Is there anyone else who can verify what actually happened in that garden? Maya hesitated, her fingers tracking the edges of the white card in her pocket. Ethan knows. But I can't call him Mom. Dr. Vance explicitly forbade it. If I do, she'll say Victoria was telling the truth. Elena leaned across the table. Victoria used his name to commit a malicious act. Dr. Vance used his family's wealth to threaten you. Ethan Harrison has every right to know how his name is being weaponized. Maya pulled out her cracked smartphone, her heart hammering violently. She opened a text draft, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She wrote, Hello, Ethan. It's Maya from the party. I am so incredibly sorry to bother you, but… She stopped, looking at her mother. Elena nodded encouragingly. Go on. Maya took a deep breath and typed everything out the horrific rumors Victoria was spreading. The confrontation in the school hallway, her meeting with Dr. Vance, and the direct threat to her academic scholarship. She read it over, terrified of the consequences, and finally hit send. The screen read, Delivered. 1 minute passed, then 5, then 10. Maya lowered her head, a wave of regret washing over her. It was a mistake. He won't care. But before the sentence could fully leave her mouth, her phone erupted into a loud, vibrating ring. The screen flashed brilliantly. Ethan Harrison. Maya stared at the vibrating phone, her breath catching completely in her throat. The name seemed to glow against the dark screen. Her finger hovered over the glass, paralyzed by a sudden rush of adrenaline. Elena, watching her daughter's internal struggle, offered a calm, decisive nod. Answer it, Maya. Maya slid her thumb across the screen, lifting the device to her ear. Hello? She said, her voice barely audible over the hum of the diner's refrigerator. On the other end of the line, Ethan's voice was completely different from what she anticipated. He wasn't confused, nor was he calm. There was a terrifying, quiet intensity to his tone, the kind of absolute stillness that precedes a massive storm. Maya, where exactly are you right now? I'm at a small diner about 3 blocks away from Oakwood Academy, she stammered, completely caught off guard. I'm here with my mother. There was a brief pause on the line, accompanied by the distinct sound of a high-end car engine roaring to life in the background. Maya could hear him speaking to someone else in the vehicle. They're just down the street. Then, Ethan spoke back into the receiver. Maya, I am heading your way right now. And my father is in the car with me. Maya felt the air completely leave her lungs. Your father? Ethan, please. You don't need to do this. I didn't want to create a massive problem. You didn't create a single problem, Maya. Ethan interrupted, his tone cutting through her panic like ice. They used my name to systematically destroy your reputation, and now they are actively trying to blackmail your academic future to protect their pockets. My father was sitting right next to me when your text message arrived. We are turning around. Meet us back at the school administration building. But the headmistress told us to leave. This time, Ethan said, his voice carrying an absolute, unshakable certainty. She will receive us. We will be there in exactly 5 minutes. The line went dead. Maya slowly lowered the phone, her wide eyes meeting her mother's. He's coming, and he's bringing Arthur Harrison with him. Elena didn't say a word. She simply stood up, pulled her winter coat tight around her shoulders, and picked up her purse. Then let's not keep the truth waiting. When they walked back through the heavy oak doors of Oakwood Academy, the grand building felt entirely different. The administrative hallway was dead silent, but the lights inside the headmistress's office were still burning bright. Elena walked up and knocked on the door with a thunderous force. Dr. Catherine Vance opened it, her face instantly contorting into absolute fury. This is completely unacceptable. I told you to leave this campus immediately, or I will personally call security. I wouldn't advise doing that, Catherine. A powerful, resonant voice boomed from the end of the dimly lit corridor. Everyone turned around. Walking briskly down the hallway was Ethan Harrison, his expression incredibly stern. But it was the man walking directly beside him who caused Dr. Vance to completely lose her breath. Arthur Harrison was a tall, imposing figure with sharp gray eyes and a commanding presence that required no introduction. He didn't need to shout. His name alone dictated the financial fate of entire cities. Mr. Harrison, Doctor, Vance stammered, her voice suddenly losing all its razor-sharp edge as she forced an incredibly awkward, trembling smile. I had absolutely no idea you were coming to campus tonight. What a pleasant surprise. Arthur Harrison walked directly past her into the office, his eyes surveying the room before resting on Maya and Elena. You must be Maya Moreno, he said. His voice surprisingly warm and deeply respectful. Maya nodded nervously. Yes, sir. He then turned to Elena, offering a polite bow of his head. And you are Elena. My son has told me a great deal about your family's absolute integrity. He turned back to face the headmistress, his demeanor turning instantly to ice. I believe we all need to have a very serious conversation, Dr. Vance. Please close the door. The air inside the headmistress's office became suffocatingly tense. Dr. Catherine Vance retreated behind her massive oak desk, using the furniture like a desperate shield against the overwhelming presence of the Harrison family. Mr. Harrison, I can assure you that whatever you have been told is simply a massive misunderstanding between emotional teenagers, she began rapidly, her polished facade completely cracking. I was simply trying to manage a delicate social situation to protect everyone's privacy. Arthur Harrison did not sit down. He stood in the center of the room, his hands resting in the pockets of his overcoat. A misunderstanding, Catherine? Because from where I am standing, it appears you utilized my family's philanthropic endowment as a weapon to blackmail a brilliant scholarship student into silence. Dr. Vance's face drained of all color. That is absolutely not what occurred, Ethan. Please enlighten us, Arthur commanded. Ethan stepped forward, looking directly at the headmistress. On Friday night, Julian Vance and Victoria Sterling explicitly used my name to lure Maya into a dark garden for the sole purpose of filming her humiliation for social media. When I exposed their behavior, they began spreading malicious lies throughout the school today to protect their social standing. And instead of investigating the truth, you threatened to revoke Maya's scholarship to ensure my father's money remained secure. Before Dr. Vance could offer another desperate excuse, heavy footsteps hurried down the corridor. The office door burst open, and Julian Vance entered, followed closely by his parents, Fernando and Clara Vance. Victoria Sterling and her wealthy father were trailing directly behind them. They had clearly been summoned in a panic by Dr. Vance's assistant. Arthur, Fernando Vance exclaimed, rushing into the room with an extended hand. I came the exact moment I heard you were on campus. What on earth is going on here? Arthur Harrison ignored the extended hand entirely. We are here to witness the absolute death of a lie, Fernando. Clara Vance immediately pointed a manicured finger at Maya. This is about that girl, isn't it? Julian told us everything. She has been completely harassing Ethan, tracking him down at parties. That is an absolute fabrication, Mother. Ethan's voice cut through the room like a physical blade, silencing the entire Vance family instantly. He pulled out his phone and unlocked the screen. Victoria, do you happen to remember the text message you sent to my personal number at midnight on Saturday? Victoria Sterling froze, her eyes widening in absolute horror. Ethan began to read the text out loud for everyone in the room to hear. Ethan, I am so incredibly sorry about the prank on Friday. It was a total lapse of judgment. Julian and I were just bored and looking for a quick laugh. Please don't be angry, and please don't mention this to your father. The silence that followed was deafening. The elaborate lie vanished in an instant. Fernando Vance turned a terrifying shade of red, spinning around to face his son. Julian, is this true? Julian lowered his head, completely unable to meet his father's eyes. It was Victoria's idea, he whispered miserably. Don't you dare pin this entirely on me, Victoria shrieked, her composed demeanor shattering into ugly desperation. You were the one holding the camera. Maya watched the two wealthy teenagers turn on each other, but she felt absolutely no sense of malicious joy. She simply felt a massive, overwhelming sense of relief. The truth was finally out. Arthur Harrison raised a single hand, and the room fell completely silent once more. Enough, Arthur said, his voice dripping with profound disappointment. He looked directly at Julian and Victoria. What you two committed was an act of calculated emotional violence. It displays a profound lack of moral character. He then turned his gaze slowly to Dr. Catherine Vance. But your failure, headmistress, is infinitely worse. Your students acted out of childish cruelty, but you acted out of deliberate adult greed. You threw away your moral obligation to protect a student to safeguard a financial donation. Dr. Vance began to weep silently, knowing her career was effectively over. Therefore, Arthur Harrison announced calmly, the multi-million-dollar endowment my family intended to give Oakwood Academy for the new science wing is officially and permanently canceled. The headmistress collapsed back into her chair, utterly ruined. However, Arthur continued, walking over to stand directly beside Maya and her mother. That capital will not go to waste. My son told me about your father, Elena, a military man named Manuel Moreno, who understood that true dignity cannot be bought. In his honor, the Harrison Foundation is establishing the Manuel Moreno Memorial Scholarship Fund. It will completely cover every single cent of Maya's academic expenses through university, and it will be administered entirely by an independent board. You will have absolutely no oversight, Dr. Vance. Maya looked at her mother, tears of pure gratitude overflowing from her eyes. Elena was weeping silently, her hands covering her mouth, her shoulders shaking. For the first time in her life, the world had seen her, respected her, and honored the legacy of her father. Ethan caught Maya's eye from across the room and offered a quiet, respectful smile. The girl they had tried so desperately to break had just changed everything. The grand administrative office slowly cleared out as the disgraced families slunk away into the cold Boston night. Julian and Victoria walked out with their heads bowed, the heavy weight of real, undeniable consequences settling over their futures. The golden armor of their family names had completely failed to protect them from the harsh light of the truth. Maya and Elena stood alone in the hallway with Ethan and Arthur Harrison. Thank you, Mr. Harrison, Elena said, her voice rich with emotion as she shook the billionaire's hand. You have no idea what this means to our family, Arthur smiled warmly. No, Elena, thank you. Your daughter showed more courage today than most corporate executives show in a lifetime. Keep standing tall, Maya. He turned to walk toward the exit, giving his son a brief, prideful nod. Ethan stepped closer to Maya, his demeanor relaxed and genuinely happy. I believe your grandfather is looking down right now with immense pride, he said softly. Maya offered a radiant, tearful smile. I never imagined a nightmare like this could ever turn into something so beautiful. Ethan shook his head slightly. Sometimes, corrupt people create dark situations specifically so that the right people can finally be brought into the light. I'll see you around, Maya. See you around, Ethan. As mother and daughter walked out of Oakwood Academy that night, the historic brick buildings no longer felt intimidating. The invisible barriers had crumbled. They climbed into their modest car, the interior warming slowly against the winter chill. Elena turned to her daughter, her eyes shining with absolute love. You did beautifully tonight, my love. Maya rested her head against her mother's shoulder. We did it together, Mom. Through this harrowing experience, they had reaffirmed a vital truth that many wealthy families spend their entire lives trying to buy, but can never truly possess. Life has a profound way of testing our foundation, and for those who have spent a lifetime working in the shadows, Enduring the quiet slights of the world, it is easy to believe that power belongs exclusively to those with heavy purses and famous surnames. But the grandest lesson of human existence is that material wealth is a fleeting, superficial illusion. It can buy mansions, it can secure elite titles, and it can command superficial roomfuls of people, but it can never purchase a single ounce of genuine human respect. True dignity is an internal fortress. It is forged in the quiet honesty of daily labor, in the fierce protection of the vulnerable, and in the absolute refusal to bow your head when the world demands your submission. When we treat others with dismissive cruelty simply because we occupy a higher social rung, we do not diminish their worth. We merely expose the catastrophic bankruptcy of our own souls. Maya had entered that coastal mansion as an unnoticed servant, but she left it as a monument of strength, proving that when the glittering facades of the world finally fade away, it is the quiet, unyielding integrity of the human spirit that remains standing tall, illuminated by the absolute light of truth.